Tepe haven't bought Tatras since the 90s. The main manufacturer they're using now is Škoda, and Škoda are also old. They're as old as any of these other companies. If we jump over here, they're saying they were formed in 1995 in Pilsen. In reality, the Škoda works in Pilsen goes back much, much further. If I can find the older history link here. Well, here at least are some of their old Škoda locomotives. Škoda are much more associated with heavy rail than with light rail. Light rail has become more and more common over time, but they've built a lot of different things. So they built, for example, battleships, or pieces of battleships at least, for the Austro-Hungarian Navy. Obviously, the Czechs have never had a navy because they're a landlocked country, but Austria-Hungary was another story. And like Czech AD, Škoda built all kinds of heavy metal equipment, including anvils, but also steam locomotives, electric locomotives, which they still manufacture, in Pilsen anyway. And there's one of the trams. That is a 14T and is one of the earlier Škoda trams to be adopted in Prague. They were manufacturing trams for other cities a lot earlier, like Brno, but they didn't start manufacturing Prague trams until fairly recently, basically when Tatra were no longer available. It's also worth noting that they build trolleybuses, for example. One other confusing thing is, they also manufactured weaponry. I don't know too much about these guns. They appear to be in a bunker. Yeah, they're in a bunker. But bottom line, they're a little bit confusing too because they've also manufactured cars, roughly in the same era as Praga and Tatra, but they've survived, albeit in the form of Škoda Auto, who are owned, in fact, by Volkswagen Group at this point. So there's Škoda Auto. They're actually based in Mladá Boleslav rather than in Pilsen. And their cars are actually still popular. They're not in the position of Praga only making Exotica or Tatra only making trucks. They do still build cars all the time and are very, very successful in this, although a lot of the cars are based on Volkswagens. And here they're also showing other factories that they maintain, including in China. Anyway, we jump back to the trams. They have a list of classes. Originally, they did rebuilds of Tatras, which makes sense. So I said 1980s earlier. Really, it was 1990s. It just the problem is these trams look so old. You think they're from the 80s. They look really old. But that was their first original design, built primarily for Brno, but also Olomouc, Ostrava, Pilsen, and Most. There's the 05. They're saying this is only a prototype. And see, they all end with T, O1T, O2T, O3T, and so on. Some of these are only for export. This was only built for the USA. So, for Portland. Now, the Portland case is interesting because they're very much connected to Czech trams, even though they're obviously an American system. So here's another 10T in a somewhat more representative livery, you could say. Not in the sense that the Czech Republic has anything like this, but because you can see the front design a little bit more clearly, and you can see the resemblance to the 03T, for example. But I've read a lot about them considering Tatras back when Tatras were still available, even buying them used, but they ended up with Škodas, as well as Inicons. And Inicon were a company in Ostrava made up partly of ex-Czech engineers, and they're easy to miss because they don't build trams for Prague. They build them for Ostrava and obviously for foreign buyers like the Portland system. And you can see the resemblance with Škodas, actually, and they collaborate with Škoda. So they're not, strictly speaking, a competitor. So they have the 01 Trio, this one, which serves in Olomouc and Ostrava, not Portland. The 12 Trio, which is originally intended for Ostrava, but as you can see, this one's serving in Portland. And they point out that Seattle also have them. I haven't done very much about Seattle, actually, on the channel. And at least according to this, none of them are currently serving in Ostrava. So they ended up being export only in the end. And you can see how it was based on the Škoda 03T, even though it's not strictly speaking a Škoda. So we're back at the 03 page again. But Inicon is an interesting, obscure tram manufacturer, you could say. They've only been around since 2001. And as I said, they were founded partly by Czech engineers, and Czech was falling apart by that point, so they needed to go somewhere. So they were very lucky in that they jumped ship at Czech before the place completely collapsed. Because as you can see, Inicon had been trying to get their tram business together since 1996. So there was a lead-in that probably saved a lot of people's careers. This is their official website, which actually looks a lot like it could be from the 90s, actually. Maybe they could hire somebody to make a better, more modern-looking website. But yeah, that's an interesting little tangent, you could say, in all this. I'll have to continue the tram story in the next video.